Welcome to another episode of the TechnoWizards podcast. For those of you who don't know, we are the TechnoWizards team 16458 and FTC team in San Antonio, Texas. My name is Vincent,
And I'm Ditya.
and today we are joined by Sushi Squad team 14179. Sushi Squad is a community FTC team based in Richmond, Washington, consisting of 8 members. This is going to be their sixth season competing, and they're super excited to connect with even more teams this year. So to start off, can you give a brief overview of your team and like how you started?
Me and Tyler were actually both one of the founding members. So we just kind of like got together some of our friends and then we decided to start in 2017, I think. And then we've just continued since now.
And what made you like want to do like robotics in the first place?
Tyler, do you want to take this
Yeah,
question?
sure. It was definitely just something interesting that we wanted to do because, I just think we all thought it was just a unique opportunity where we have this sort of the game field, right? And it's a lot of fun to try to find different solutions to, design the best robot we can, and also that we can also like reach out to our community too and teach them more about STEM.
So, what is the brainstorming process like when designing a new robot?
So for the brainstorming process, I think for our team specifically, we like a lot of our different like boards. Like we have a strategy board, we have hardware, software, and essentially what we like to do is we like to all work together a lot because we found that that like sort of inter team communication helps a lot for solving like small issues and stuff, and especially for the brainstorming process because what will happen is our strategy team will first like take a look at the game and sort of try to figure out which points are sort of the most efficient to get, uh, things like that. Where, like for last year, wait, let me think back to last year. It's been a while now. Um, yeah, so last year, right, we had the poles, and we sort of saw that there's different heights of poles, but if you can sort of shoot for the lower ones, you might as well go for the higher ones. And we thought that like going for higher poles were more efficient, and so we sort of focus our design based on that, right? And so we'll have our strategy team take a look at the game, pick out the most efficient and most reliable sources of points, and then our hardware team, which is me and some other people, will start building like the robot sort of based around those criteria.
Okay, so after you're done brainstorming, how do you like start prototyping and like what's the process that you take to implement that feature?
Yeah, so for sure. So for prototyping, we definitely take a more of a modular process where each thing own has its own system. So that way we can work on multiple parts of the robot at the same time. Like for instance, we can work on the robot chassis, the arm. Like usually there's some sort of arm or some sort of linear slide system, and we can work on all that at the same time. And so for prototyping, usually what we do is we just start with like real basic, just get our hands on the pieces, try to make something work, and see if like our idea even works in the first place. And once we get like sort of a proof of concept, we'll go into CAD and design something a little more complicated with some more like unique specialized parts, which will help us like the optimize the component that we're trying to make, and then we'll actually make it with our CNC mill or 3D printing, and then we'll keep testing and then refine from there.
So wait, so how do you define like which mechanisms are like the best for your robot?
Uh, what do you mean?
Like which mechanism that you would use like to actually implement it, like because I'm sure that you have like multiple ideas for like different like options.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
like
for sure. Yeah, so that's why we usually have like a rapid prototyping phase right at the beginning where you
mhm,
just sort of get some like of the aluminum beams, just start testing stuff because when we
yeah.
have a lot of ideas, that's sort of the best way for us to narrow down what sort of feels like it works, what maybe with a little bit more like designing will work, and some things that just sort of fall flat.
Okay. So what do you think was the most innovative part of the robot?
I think for last year we had this counterbalancing spring system, which was really innovative. So in our first league match, we had an issue where we had like a lift arm that would lift up like this, and it it extended out pretty far and had a cone at the end. And the issue was that having to like lift it all the way up and down like pretty quickly too would usually cause it to break and cause the servo to stall. And so we needed some way to like sort of like beef up the servo, beef up that arm so that even like if it gets like hit too, right, it will still be able to continue working. And so first we like improve the servos, improve the gearboxes, stuff like that. but the solution that really helped us was creating a counterbalancing spring, which what it essentially does is offsets the force of gravity so that the arm sort of just like floats to the right. Usually, if everything is turned on, the arm will just fall down. But with the counterbalancing spring, it perfectly balances so that so however far out the arm is, like if it's perfectly this far out, the spring is pulled strong enough to hold it right there. And as it drops down more, the spring will loosen. And so that essentially counteracts the force of gravity on the arm so that the only force there is just like whatever the force of the servo is using to move the cone. So I think that was pretty innovative from last year, and that solved the problem we had originally, and it also was just like it just worked really well, honestly. So yeah,
Yeah,
we're
that's
very proud of that.
interesting. That's cool.
So, can you walk us through like your drivetrain this year, and how did you decide on like what type of drivetrain you wanted to use this year?
Yeah. So for a drivetrain, I think we usually like to keep it pretty simple each year. We just use a Mecanum drivetrain. Sometimes we'll change it up a little bit here and there depending on if we want to depending where we want to put the motors, right? Because last year we had the motors sort of more in the middle, and because we didn't like need that space as much, right? But this year we had sort of like a massive turret base right in the middle, and we wanted that space below it to put the electronics so we could have the top all clear. So we kept the motors along the aluminum sides essentially. And so yeah, so we keep our drivetrain pretty simple, right? And that also helps us with our more like modular building system where we sort of build stuff on top of it rather than where everything like interconnects with each other. It's more modular. We can work on each thing at a time and then just put it on top of the drivetrain. So yeah.
So when we were looking at your robot this year, we saw that you didn't have a transfer system. So why did you decide to do that?
We sort of saw that as just like another point of complexity, right? We sort of had something similar to that last year or the year before that, where like the freight, where we had to pick up the freight and then put it on the towers. And so we had a two-part system where we had sort of like an intake that went in and then dumped into the bucket and then it spun around and placed it over there. But we found that like that transfer there, sometimes like something goes wrong there, or like it just makes it another step that if we just had like a better arm in the first place, we wouldn't necessarily need it. And so this year also, since the cones were also super light and not as like varied as the freight where some of them were weighted, some of them were not, and then some were also balls, the cones were a lot easier to manage. We just had to make a sort of like a more custom claw for the cones, and that pretty much just handled like the intake side of it. And then for the outtake, it's pretty simple. We just kept it on like a linear slide. So yeah.
Okay, that's cool. So in terms of software, what do you know what resources are useful for when creating programs?
I'm not actually on the software team, but I'm pretty sure we use Roadrunner, and especially for software, I think the most important thing is just having like control systems that'll like essentially monitor what you're doing and try to keep your robot where like the software or where you and like the software sort of thinks it is. And so I think that helps a lot for autonomous, especially to sort of have consistency in that. And also it does help a lot for driving, like for last year, because the entire field was sort of like a grid, making sure that when your robot like moves to the side, it goes perfectly straight. That helps a lot to stay on that sort of grid.
Okay, yeah.
And like you said, you had like a modular robot.
Mhm.
How do you like manage like accessibility to like wires and stuff like that? Does like the modular part of your robot help with that?
Yeah, I think it definitely helps. Last year was a little bit more of a mess, but I think because last year we tried to put all the electronics just in the base of the robot, so we had a lot of space on top. Um, for wire specifically, we try to go more for like keeping it compact rather than like really accessible. So for the most part, we just connect it once and just like leave it there. But if there is something we need to fix, right, the modularity definitely helps us. We know which pieces we need to take off to access which parts of like the control hub and stuff.
Yeah, that's actually something we did this year as well. So going on to outreach, how do you like think of like different outreach ideas and what's like your brainstorming process behind that?
Well, every year, we really like to connect with new communities and we want to target like especially younger students who like may not have any experience with robotics. So what we would do is we would kind of like build a robot that would cater to their existing interests. So like for a few years now, we've been outreaching to like a summer camp at a local swimming center. And what we did one year was we built like a bubble blowing robot that could like follow them while they swam because it had like a camera. And then they found that really fun, right? Because we kind of connected their interest of swimming to robotics. And I think a few years ago there was like a ring shooter robot like during the 2020 season, I think. So we also used that, and then we brought it to a karate center, and they like kicked the rings and stuff, and they found that really fun. So yeah, so we try to like make robots that are appealing to those groups.
And like, how do you find like people to like be in like your outreach events, or like how do you find like I guess like opportunities?
Mm-hmm. So we kind of just look for like local organizations that kind of are interested in STEM, because like a lot of organizations, they want to introduce STEM to their kids, but they might not have the resources. Like last year we connected with an organization called Mary's Place, and they had a kids club, right? And they, it's more of like a casual thing. They didn't really have anything like specifically robotics or like STEM. So what we did was we brought a lot of like Lego robot sets to them, and then we taught them how to build it and how to drive it, and they had a lot of fun doing that.
And what steps do you take in organizing an outreach event?
Um I well, like I guess we like in the beginning of the season, right? We tried to see like, oh, like which communities do we want to hit this year? Like which of the people we reached out to last year, like do we want to do again this year? Like is there any specific events we want to go to? And then we kind of make a list of that, and then according to like our availability and like those organizations' availability, we try to see like which one is like most real, which of them are most realistic for us to hit this year. So yeah, that's typically what we do.
And do you ever need like sponsors to like host an outreach event, or no?
Um, well, like as I said before, right, we reach out to a lot of communities that may not have prior robotics experience, so we do need to like provide the robot kits for that. So we do have sponsors. Like for sponsors, we typically reach out to like the tech companies around us and see if they're interested in sponsoring us, and that has so far like helped us in covering the fees we need to like purchase these kits and stuff.
And like this is kind of like unrelated, but like our team has like really like hard time finding sponsors. We contacted like 50 organizations, and like none of them like responded. So how do you like obtain these sponsors?
Um, well, to be honest, like some of the sponsors is like where like the members' parents work because they have like a matching program or something. And then yeah, in our first few seasons, we also like contacted like 50 sponsors, and barely any responded. So I would probably suggest like, targeting like the smaller like companies first, because they're more likely to reply, right? So yeah.
And what was like the outreach event that you like remember the most, or was like your favorite?
Um, that's a good question. I think one that all of us really liked was going to Mary's place, because we went there like multiple times, so we could kind of see the process of the kids developing an interest for STEM like while we were there, and that was really exciting for us to watch.
And did you do like any like outreach outside of like your local area, or no?
Yeah, so we've connected with like some FTC teams in China, in Shanghai, and then I believe we did like a webinar before, because at the time like it was like the lockdown was over here in the US, but in China it was still locked down, so they couldn't have like any in-person competitions, and it was really difficult for them to get like the robot materials because like they couldn't ship it to China. So we hosted like a webinar, and we tried to like figure out like, oh, like what are like some virtual events that you could host? Like how could you, still build a robot with like the limited resources you have right now? And then after that, last season we also connected with a few schools in like rural China, and then we also like shipped robot kits over there, and then we also partner with some organizations like nonprofits that are based in China, so they can like actually like send volunteers to like help them, like learn how to build the robots in person, while we were kind of in charge of like the virtual part, since we couldn't actually go there.
And the last question for y'all is, if you could design like your own game for FTC, what would it be and why?
That's interesting. I think I definitely like a game like last year's was really fun, where there's sort of an interactive element between the two teams, because sometimes I feel like some games have some really good elements like team interacting like last year, but like the year before that with the, I forgot what it was called, like the middle tower thing where you're trying to get to lean one side or another. Like sometimes it gets like a little like more like what was it called? Like battle bots, you know. I think definitely some more like interactive but non-battle bot stuff would be fun. Yeah, and like I really liked last year's game because it's pretty simple, but there's like a lot of ways you can play it, you know.
Well, thank you so much for coming on our podcast today, and we'd love to keep in touch with you, and we can't wait to see what you all can accomplish next season.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.